Hey, what's up, everybody? Time for another sort of community discussion video, I guess. The failure of Fatal Fury. Although this isn't only going to be talking shit about Fatal Fury, but I'm going to say some subjective things, some objective things. So take that for what you will. And this isn't only going to be talking about Fatal Fury because I'm also just going to talk shit about fighting games in general and Street Fighter as well. But remember, if you like the videos, like, sub, silly, comment, share, support the channel if you can. I appreciate it. Thanks. Super chat, PayPal, Patreon, whatever. So Fatal Fury, Mark of the Wolves, City of the Wolves is not done as well as they would have liked, especially when you think about how much money they put into it. But something that stuck out to me when I saw this, not only this, is the the absurdity and brain rot of some of the people commenting on this. So, do you see this? So hopefully this is popping up right. Yes, fighting games aren't as big brand shooters and RPGs, but they've exploded in the past decade. Street Fighter and Guilty Gear each broke their series records. What record did Street Fighter break? Dragon Ball FighterZ alone walked away with 8 million copies sold. So this is why I kind of really wanted to do this video, because this shows that people don't know what they are talking about when it comes to the history of fighting games and everything like this. And first of all, the idea that Fatal Fury was going to warrant being promoted as it was is a very generous assumption because Fatal Fury is pretty niche. It's been dead for a long time, right? And I think people overestimate fighting games are not that big right now, dude. I hate to break it to you. Can we show this again? I've showed this before and it blows the boner. We got 2 pictures of me. It blows the boner out of your butthole. Street Fighter 6. As of just a few weeks, or as about a month ago or something like that, a little over a month and a half ago, whatever, it sold 4.67 million copies. Street Fighter 6 has been out for a couple years now, right? You know, when people say the games like Street Fighter 4, oh, Street Fighter 4 sold so much. But here's something I want you to remember. When you're looking at this image right here, do you notice how it says all the versions of Street Fighter 4? All the versions of Street Fighter 4, 10 million. But if we go to Street Fighter 2, remember Street Fighter 6 is 4.67 million. Just Street Fighter 2 on Super Nintendo that was only out for a year, 6,300,000. Again, I've said this so many times. People use these, I don't know what kind of record you're saying that Street Fighter is broken. Oh, it's broken a record on, who knows? I don't know what it is. It's broken the Stream record or some shit. Street Fighter 2, do you think it would have broken a record if it was on Steam or something like that? If we're like, you know, going back in time, say Steam existed or something back then. Whatever, right? This is why this is always so weird, because people use these like, oh, you're going through all the years of Street Fighter 4 when you count how many copies of the game Street Fighter 4 sold. But when people say Street Fighter 2, do they realize when they say Street Fighter 2, it's just Street Fighter 2? Just Street Fighter 2 in a year's time, just on Super Nintendo. Because remember, the Genesis wasn't that big in Japan, right? Who knows what it would have sold if the Genesis would have been bigger at the time, right? 6 million. You've been outsold in less time. Less time. And if we actually count like all you guys do, oh, just count all the years, it's 15 million. And that's not counting the arcade stuff. This isn't even counting some of the other collections of Street Fighter 2, which I can probably assume if they count Street Fighter 6, if it's part of any kind of collection or any kind of Street Fighter 4 collection, they probably count it just to boost up the sales. It's ridiculous when people say that, oh, fighting games are so much bigger now. They're not. I was alive back then. Trust me. I know how big fighting games used to be. Okay? And this is, you know, something else as well. I mean, I've said this before. Fighting games now are complicated at face value. Okay? They are not easy to get into now. Okay? Again, I say that as a person that has done more tech in fighting games, has changed the perspective on more stuff what is possible in fighting games than anyone else in the history of the genre. Okay? I am still putting out new stuff that has never been done before in fighting games to this day, right? People still try to recreate the stuff that I've done in all sorts of fighting games. And I've played every kind of sort of fighting game. I've put out tech that no one else has done. And I can tell you, even coming from that perspective, fighting games now are not intuitive at face value. They are confusing, okay? This is for someone that actually understands fighting games, okay? Do you get that? So you think that like a game like Fatal Fury is going to like bring in all these people that don't play fighting games or something like that to the product that didn't play before? They don't know anything about the legacy of the characters? What if you're trying to bring in a person to your product, by City of the Wolves, I mean, that you're trying to get them to give Fatal Fury a second chance? And what if at face value, when they see I'm going to give Fatal Fury a second chance, they're like, wait, some of the legacy characters that I like aren't even in it for this, and you put in this guest character, right? Say Kim isn't in it or something, or Kim's sons, the second son, whatever, right? I digress, right? But also, when they put in this game, they're like, oh, maybe at face value, you're like, you have this rev system. And like I've said before, the rev system, calling it a rev system with the meter and everything like that, it's kind of misleading, because then when you look at it, it's like, oh, it's kind of like a different version of Street Fighter 6. And you know what? Maybe, and don't get me wrong, because I don't like Street Fighter 6, obviously, right? And I've talked about the things I don't like about it. But I would assume there's probably a number of people that looked at Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves, and maybe they put it in and like, oh, let me see this rev system. What's different about it? And of course, there are different things about it than Street Fighter 6, but there is also a vibe of it's SNK's take on Street Fighter 6. So if you're trying to bring in this person that maybe doesn't like Street Fighter 6 even, right? These systems are not intuitive too. They are complicated at face value, right? It's not like Street Fighter 2 where you can look at Street Fighter 2 and you're like, oh, this is what this character does, right? This is what this character does. This is what this character does, right? Street Fighter 2, although it's simple at face value, there's a lot of depth in the Street Fighter 2 system because it was not so homogenized. Once you actually start to play Street Fighter 2, you're like, oh, this game is a lot more deep with all the, you could say jank if you're new school or something like that, or the chaos and the balance, or the balance and the chaos, excuse me, right? Whereas Street Fighter 6 is a game where you have to read the cliff notes to even get to a low level. Now, once you start getting better and better at Street Fighter 6, you know what I mean? There's only so far you can go because the game is so pre-planned, right? There's only so much nuance to it. But at a lower level, game like Street Fighter 6, if you were just picking it up for the first time, it probably blows the boner out of your fucking butthole, obviously, right? Whereas Street Fighter 2, if you're just picking it up for the first time, you're like, okay, I think I get what I do. It's just me got to execute it. And then once you start playing a bit more, you're like, whoa, there's a lot of weird, quirky interactions here. It's kind of like the difference between Street Fighter 6, one of the many, of course, but these new school games that are so, heavy focused frame data and everything like that, made for like a math nerd, etc., right? These games aren't, how are you going to try to say in the first place that fighting games are bigger now than they've ever been, which there's nothing to back up what you're saying. If you're saying like, oh, well, Capcom and SNK, they're having this $1 million tournament if you won. They never did that before for Street Fighter 2. I can assure you, if Capcom, well, I can't assure you. I'll say, I'm pretty sure, you never say never. I'm pretty sure if Capcom knew that Street Fighter 2 was going to be one of the biggest video games of all time, that it was 100% sure it was going to be one of the biggest video games of all time, they would have immediately been like, oh shit, and we're going to have a tournament for it where the person can win $100,000, $1 million, whatever it would have been. But it was brand new at the time, right? But and you can say that for sure because look at it, they don't even know if Fatal Fury was going to be a big game. They don't, quotation marks, know. Okay, like they were praying, right? You know what I mean? But they already had in the works, we're going to have this big tournament with millions of dollars. Capcom Cup. Oh, we don't know if Street Fighter 6 is going to be big. You know what I mean? But we're putting all this money into it because we're feeling like it, right? So we're going to put all these $1 million. Street Fighter 2 is like the first thing of its kind. I can pretty much guarantee, not 100%, because again, nothing is for sure, right? But had Capcom known it's going to be one of the biggest games ever, they probably would have done one of these $1 million tournaments for the game too. You know what I mean? So if that's your argument, oh, Street Fighter 2 didn't have $1 million Capcom Cup, you're a fucking idiot. Shut up. Christ. Anyway, another thing too, and I got to say this as well. I do think that the new Fatal Fury game, I think it looks ugly. I don't think it's not aesthetically pleasing to me. I think the game doesn't have a lot of pop to it. I mean, like even the level 3s are all pretty ho-hum if you're trying to like get a little clickbait kind of thing for it. Again, I'm not saying that I think it plays worse than Street Fighter 6 because I don't, because I do think it's more interesting than Street Fighter 6. I mean, I do. But I think it's a pretty ugly game. I don't think it looks good. I mean, it looks better than the King of Fighter games, but what is that saying? You're calling a turd compared to like a different color turd that's polished a little bit better. I mean, I don't think they look like, I don't like the aesthetics of it. I don't care for the comic look, which is kind of curious because I actually kind of do like Mark of the Wolves. I think it looks good. And I just don't think, I don't think SNK is cool anymore. I think SNK survived for a long time despite, I mean, if you look at a lot of those King of Fighter games, they're really bad games. I mean, they're cool games, right? But they're not well made games. There are a lot of janky, not well thought out King of Fighter games. 95, is it, where Iori, on one of the stages, he just hits the ground faster than Choi, so you can just infinite him. I mean, there's a lot of like really badly not thought out stuff that was not tested well in SNK games, right? Now, of course, there are some cool ones, right? I think most people say, oh, but 98, 2002, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of these King of Fighter games, it's not like SNK games as well. It's not like they are well known for being amazingly well-designed games. They're quirky games, sometimes cool games with a lot of charm. And I don't think SNK is that cool anymore. The characters aren't that cool anymore. A lot of the games are just combo this, combo this. I'm not saying City of the Wolves is all of that, but obviously, if you're going into a new game, you're like, oh, what was the last SNK game? Oh God, King of Fighters, where everything juggles. Oh my God, big brain. And even speaking of big brain stuff, I've said this before. Even think of this as, again, let's assume my health was not what it is. I'm not in the hospital all the time. Let's assume I had a better control or something like that. Let's assume that I hadn't had surgery on my hands and my body works better, right? At this stage in my life, even then, as you could say a connoisseur of fighting games to a certain extent, I don't think City of the Wolves is just that interesting. Even to me, it just, again, I'm like, it's kind of just like a different Street Fighter 6. It's a more interesting Street Fighter 6 for sure, but it's just the system, it doesn't pique my interest, right? And I've said this is one of the, and if you've watched my videos about how I would change fighting games, right? So many of these fighting games now, they're not interesting. And when you sell a product, there has to be a reason to buy the product. There's something you can get in this game, a perspective that you can get in this game that you are not going to get anywhere else, which is actually very relevant, right? again, I've used the example of Dragon Ball Fighter Z how many times? You already had a core group of people that were going to buy Dragon Ball Fighter Z no matter what, right? Even people bought Ultimate Battle, fuck my shit. A terrible game, right? You're going to have Dragon Ball people that would have bought Dragon Ball Fighter Z even if it was a terrible game. Not that I think the game is amazing in the first place, but that's why I said Dragon Ball Fighter Z is such a drop ball, because there are some new ideas in Dragon Ball Fighter Z, and they're ideas that can only work in Dragon Ball Fighter. And that's why it's kind of a drop ball to me, or the biggest drop ball I've even said, because you had a core group of people that were going to buy the game and basically make it profitable no matter what. But you could have even made it greater, because you could have put a new perspective on what a fighting game can be by bringing in an audience that might not care about a Dragon Ball Z game. Which of course, the people did buy the game that might not necessarily care about Dragon Ball Z characters, but it could have been even better, right? So when you have a game like Fatal Fury, you have this niche audience that is already becoming older in age, that probably doesn't even care about playing fighting games half the time anymore. But you can still have some, an group of people that, still play. You have a sort of core audience that are going to play. But if you're trying to bring in all these new people, or even bring out some of these people out of the woodwork to buy the game as well, and you don't even include the legacy characters that people want, and you put in characters that people don't want, and then you're not even putting a new perspective on what a fighting game can be, you're kind of making a Mark of the Wolves meets Street Fighter 6, I guess, right? And it's like, I'm not mentally stimulated, right? And I'm sure other people feel the same way. They're like, oh, God, well, I already played Mark of the Wolves. I already played Street Fighter 6. Why do I need this game? I don't think I need to pay $60, right? And to see people say weird shit like, oh, it's because, well, of course, some people are like, it's because, there's so much oil money, blah, 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 right? But then you also see people say, no, it's not that weird because fighting games are bigger than they've ever been. No, they're not. They're not. And fighting games are actually more complicated now at face value. Fighting games are confusing, right? And I say that as a person, and I know people watch this video, but they'll get mad. But it's true. No one has done the stuff that I've done in fighting games. I understand fighting games better than anyone else in the history of fighting games. You could probably make a pretty good argument for that. I have looked at games and predicted pretty much exactly how they were going to work. How many times now? Do you see anyone else that has done that without ever even playing them? I still put in these old games, haven't played the game for years, put out new stuff that no one else has ever done before. I understand games pretty well. And even I can say, these new games, they're complicated. You don't go to your friend and be like, hey, want to play Street Fighter 6? Oh, fuck. Well, to even get to a sort of level, you're going to have to study this frame data for a while. Don't worry, you can mash and everything like that, but there's this meter. You might have to read about it a little bit. Or if you want to play Street Fighter 2 and just mash a little bit, shoot some fireballs, dragon punches, throw me a few times. You'd probably find a friend that'd be like, okay, I'll just play that game for a little bit. I remember this game, it's fun, it's old, but it's not that complicated, right? You know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just think they should have done something else. Again, I have said what I would have done with the system. I would have tried to finagle some of the things in the system. If you watched what I talked about, there's got to be a new perspective that gets your brain working to really, especially if you want to bring in these people that might not want to play your game in the first place. Because there's always going to be that mindset of, you know what? I'm going to try this because this is a perspective I cannot get in any other game, right? And again, that's why if you ever watch those videos about how I would change fighting games and systems I would put in, I myself, I don't make games, but I can tell you what, I can make a brand new system in a fighting game that is a different perspective on what fighting games can be. And it's a perspective you can't get in another fighting game. So it would always be fresh. And it's systems that no character uses the same way. So it's not homogenized. I always feel, like I said before, that'd be one of the things I would leave the fighting game community with forever, right? If I knew how to actually program or anything, I don't have the ability to do that. You know what I mean? But, rebalance some of these games, remake some of these games, whatever. Just show you what like a fighting game can actually be, dude. Right? But ultimately, again, and I said before, I just don't think SNK is cool anymore either. It just, SNK really lost, and again, I said, because a lot of these games, they're not good games, some of these old SNK games in the first place, but they had this sort of special charm and this swag, and SNK does not have that anymore. Their characters are not that cool anymore. Anyway, if you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel if you can. Appreciate it. Thanks. The end.